Welcome to the Book Pub Podcast. This is a podcast where we like to talk about books and the authors who wrote them while enjoying a nice cocktail.
Yay!
I'm Lesley.
I'm Madeline.
Yay.
We're, if you couldn't guess it, your hosts.
Bring you on this magical literary journey.
We're like the magic carpet ride.
For your brain.
For your brain and your reading pleasures.
Mm-hmm.
Yay!
Yeah.
We're not Aladdin and Jasmine.
No. We're more like Belle.
Oh my god, yes! Sorry, I got really excited. I love her. Her or Ariel.
Okay, yes. You can be Ariel, I'll be Belle.
No, I want to be a Belle. Like, can I be like a hybrid of like a Belle Ariel?
A Belle Ariel. Oh, instead of her thingamabob, like, museum thing that she has a bunch of books and library. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. But I can be a mermaid at the same time.
Yeah. So, magical books that don't get wet and disintegrate under the ocean.
There you go. We figured out life's problems. So I have a table where I do all of my group work with my students.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my students had this sticker, and it's like the speech bubble sticker.
Yeah.
And it says, "I'm really a mermaid." Well, it fell off. I picked it up off the floor and stuck it on that table and put it like right at the corner where it looks like I'm saying it.
Nice.
To always remind myself that I'm really a mermaid. I stole a child sticker.
Hey, they lost it.
Right, that's true. I didn't
Finders
pick it off
keepers.
of their hand.
It's the elementary school logic. Finders keepers, man.
Yeah, right? Okay, see, I'm just turning into a child. Lesley, who are we doing?
We are doing Zora Neale Hurston, who is best known for writing Their Eyes Were Watching God. But in addition to being a novelist, she was an anthropologist, filmmaker, folklorist, and is known for being one of the most significant and influential Black women writers of the first half of the 20th century, exploring issues of racism, gender, sexuality, social class, and love.
Interesting.
Yes.
I'm going to tap on the folklorist.
Yeah.
Or that's just like, what? How do you be a modern folklorist? Or is it one that you just make sure that you keep folklore alive? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, we'll kind of get into it. I did also just add in my little intro-y thing her work as an anthropologist in the field of folklore, surveyed everything from Afro-American songs to voodoo, hoodoo, and ultimately influenced modern American music and also the whole critical race theory that is widely discussed today.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of how she's a folklorist.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
But I'll go into it
She
more.
sounds very educated.
Yes. Oh, yeah. She's freaking awesome.
I like it. And Lesley, what are we drinking?
I'm
so excited.
Yes. We were drinking Guava mint Mojito. So it is 3 ounces of guava juice, 1 ounce of rum, lime juice, and a little bit of mint, 2 sprigs in case you overdo your mint. And then shake that all up together, crush the mint beforehand, shake it all up, pour it into a glass, put some soda water on top, and you have a beautiful, cute pink drink.
I'm over the moon. It's been a very rough few weeks, and guava juice is my absolute favorite, and it's my dad's too, and we share that in common. So hi, Dad. Daddy.
Guava juice always reminds me of my grandma because she would always have guava juice at her house. So it was like
right, and so it's like a feel good drink where it reminds you of people that you love, and so I'm like really excited about this drink.
Yay! Well, l'chaim.
L'chaim. Oh lordy, good thing there's only like 1 shot of vodka. What is it?
Rum. I know we always like do vodka stuff and gin based stuff, and this is like I think this is like one of the only rum based things we've ever
done.
done.
Do it very often.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I love rum. It's made from sugarcane. How can I not love rum?
So yay.
But this is really like dangerously good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing. It's like a weaker drink.
I know, and you can. We're gonna play our guessing game, so you can guess why I chose specifically this and these ingredients and all of that. So
I'm into it.
Yay!
I'm into it. So what, you made this up?
Not quite. I did kind of find it, but it was like I was actually looking for other things, and then this kind of popped up, and I'm like, oh my god, that is perfect.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I'm going to start off doing something a little different for my intro instead of shouting out a birth date. And I stole this. I'll just say right now, I kind of stole this from Valerie Boyd. She wrote the book Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston. So,
cool.
Okay, so let's just imagine right now it's 1925 and you're at this after party for the Literary Awards dinner sponsored by Opportunity Magazine. And sitting around you is all these famous writers, both black and white, like County Cullen and Eugene O'Neill, and all these amazing critics who are like the best known journalists and critics of the day. But there's one thing that no one can stop talking about is newcomer Zora Neale Hurston. Not only did she take home 4 awards, 2 honorable mentions, and 2 second-place prizes for her short story Spunk, and a drama that she wrote called Color Struck, but when she walked into that room, she's wearing a long, richly covered, colorful scarf, which she dramatically throws around her neck while shouting, "Color Struck!"
Wow.
at the top of her lungs, and literally stopping the party.
Wow.
It's with this combination of charm and powerful presence, and definitely a bit of doing it her own way, that Zora used throughout her life.
Oh, I like it. That's a good story. That's a good kickoff.
Interested in hearing more?
No, I'm good. Okay, so yes, I want to hear more.
So, Zora Neale Hurston was born January 7th, 1891.
Ooh. Oh.
1891.
Okay. Yeah.
In Nostulega, Alabama? I don't know. It's Alabama. She was born in Alabama.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what? And guess what? She doesn't really remember being in Alabama anyway. So, she's probably not offended by me not pronouncing her hometown, her birthplace. She's the 5th of 8 kids, but her family quickly moves to Eatonville, Florida when she's still a toddler. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. So she basically grew up in Eatonville. And a little background on Eatonville. It was a rural community near Orlando, and it is the first U.S. incorporated black township established in 1887, which means that it was established for and by African Americans. So essentially, like, a lot of the African Americans in the area were experiencing things like police brutality and all of that. And so they kind of move over to their own, like, land. This guy kind of sells them all this land. As Hurston describes it, quote, "It's a city with 5 lakes, 3 croquet courts, 300 brown skins, 300 good swimmers, plenty of guavas, 2 schools, and no jailhouse."
Ding, ding, ding. Figured out the first one.
I'm like, that sounds like paradise. Let's just play croquet and like drink guava.
Oh, I'm so into it.
Yeah.
Sounds luxurious.
So Zora would often refer to Eatonville as her birthplace, as she had no memory of Alabama. Growing up in Eatonville meant growing up sheltered from the Jim Crow South. All around her were culturally affirming signs of black achievement. The town council was made up of all black men. No women.
I mean, it was still the times.
Yeah.
Not great. Not a fan, but
yeah. So
we say it with
cool.
like a little...
It's cool.
Okay.
Yeah. One of those men being her father, who was also mayor at one point, and he was also the town preacher. And her Sunday school was run by black women, including her mother. And yeah, all around her is just African Americans living independent from white society. So it's pretty cool kind of childhood in comparison to, I don't know, a lot of other...
Jim Crow South
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very lucky.
Yeah.
She's extremely lucky.
Yeah.
And really cool that she got to have this kind of fun...
Like away from adversity. So
Yeah, so she could like really flourish as herself.
yeah, exactly. She can be that woman throwing that scarf around her neck, you know?
Mhm, exactly.
So her mother was really supportive of Zora and her siblings, telling them later, quote, "Jump at the sun." Hurston explained, "We might not land on the sun, but at least we'd get off the ground." So,
I like that.
yeah,
I like that.
At least you get off the ground.
Yeah, I like it.
Her father, on the other hand, was nicknamed the Hammer of God.
Oh, God. That's totally what you want your nickname to be. If you're a preacher, sure, great.
Maybe, yeah.
Anybody else? Like, oh, that's so insulting.
Zora, quote, "He could flatten people to the floor either with his big fists or with his hellfire eloquence."
Oh, God. Okay. Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yeah, so he's like this big, strong, and
Fire and
strong
brimstone.
voice, yes, fire and brimstone preacher, but also like all like hulked out, I guess, or something.
And there's her mom, who's just kind of more ethereal, like, jump at the sun.
Yes, children, play.
You can
enjoy
do it.
life.
Let's make some, grass headscarves or something.
Yeah.
I just don't see that marriage, but okay, yeah, it works.
Her family lived in an 8-room house on 5 acres of land, and childhood was pretty much, sunshine and guavas.
Coming up daisies.
Yes.
Wait.
Daisies, isn't that when you're dead?
Ah, never mind. It's coming up roses.
Coming up roses.
That's the one.
Exactly. Unfortunately, though, when Zora was 13, her mother died. And
Leslie,
I know.
I'll pay you $50,000 to do a happy story.
And her father quickly remarried to, quote, a fat shrew.
Fat shrew.
Yeah, Zora didn't like her.
No, really? I tell all the people that I love someone. When I love someone, I call them a fat shrew.
Yeah, oh my God, you're my best friend. You're such a fat shrew.
You're such a fat shrew. Let's get together.
So her stepmom was only 6 years older than Zora.
Oh, Lordy.
And Zora felt like this woman was using her father to like kind of socially climb, since, he was like the preacher and pretty popular and all of that. And she's basically seen as like this evil stepmother to Zora and her siblings. And each of them were essentially like kind of driven from living in the house after her father remarried. And so Zora leaves when she's 16. What happens is like she and her stepmom end up getting into a fist fight. And Zora says that like if her father hadn't like come in, she like totally would have killed her stepmom.
Ooh,
Yeah.
scrappy.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I also don't beat people up, but like,
Yeah. It's kind of
Cool.
like, okay, that's kind of a neat background. I mean, like, yeah, girl, stand up for yourself. Like, but don't beat up people.
yeah, but don't beat up people. Use your words.
Yeah.
Oh, but I guess she learned how to do that, right? Oh, click.
So after she leaves home, she drops out of school and she works as a nanny or maiding jobs for several white families, as she enjoyed working with children and having the opportunity to like hang out and read books with them, and also like have books and read them and all of that. Like early on in her life, she was really changed because there was like some school teacher from, I don't know, some other state or something like that, who like came and like donated a bunch of school books to her school when she was younger. And she was like, oh my God, books are amazing. I love this.
Cool.
So, yeah.
I'm into it.
But eventually, so she ends up eventually working for this lead singer in a Gilbert and Sullivan traveling troupe as a maid and a manicurist. By 1917, Zora is technically 26 years old. All right. So she's 26 years old. She's decided now that she like doesn't want to keep working as like a maid and a manicurist, and she wants to go get an education. But unfortunately, because of her age and the fact that she never graduated from high school, she's ineligible for like free public schooling. So what's she gonna do? But she cuts 10 years off her age. And, so she starts claiming that she was born in 1901, and she enrolls in high school in Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, fun. Cool.
Yes. And so now going forward for like the rest of her life, pretty much, she would always present herself as 10 years younger than she actually was.
So that story at the beginning is interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's like the date told the story, and then you said what year she was born. So I did the math, and I was like, okay, so she's like this up-and-coming writer in her 30s.
Yeah.
But according to everyone else, she was an
up-and-coming writer,
in
and she's
her
like 20 something. Yeah.
So then it kind of like changes that conversation a little bit. But
Yeah.
cool. I'm into it.
Yeah. I'm like, I think it's just so funny. And it's like, oh, she presents herself as 10 years younger to the point when she ends up writing a autobiography in the 40s. She like is really like kind of ambiguous about like her like the times and dates and things like that, and like historical events, because like she's still presenting herself as being 10 years younger than she actually is.
That's hilarious. Zora.
Yeah. So after graduating from high school, she attends Howard University in Washington, D.C., a historically Black university. And I also feel like it's very important to always point out that like Howard University in its first 5 years of inception educated 150,000 former slaves, because they are fucking awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. And like the first 5 years, it was like, boom, we educated like all of these fucking people. We actually took care of the issue. And instead of like, yeah, you're free, it's like, no, now we're going to educate you. Like,
That's cool.
so it's at Howard where Zora begins writing poetry, and she was a founding member of the Hilltop, which is the school's student newspaper. Her writing gets noticed by Charles S. Johnson, who founded Opportunity magazine, and he encourages her to move to Harlem to pursue a literary career. At this time, Zora...
Oh, yeah. I'm so into this.
Yeah, like, hey, you're a really good writer. Why don't you move to New York? You know? Like...
Yeah. That was the place to be.
Yeah.
Was Harlem.
Harlem Renaissance is starting to happen. It's like, yeah,
creative
1920.
juices are flowing over there. So it's like being in Paris in the 20s type of thing.
Exactly, right? It's like everything's happening. Let's go.
Let's go.
So at this time, Zora didn't have enough money for another semester at Howard. And, you know, she'd been like paying her way by being a manicurist and stuff like that. And so she leaves for New York and arrives there with only $1.50 to her name.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a cool story.
Yeah. And so, but, you know, she's great. She's like really friendly and awesome. And so she, you know, finds a place to live, and she kind of becomes part of the rent party scene. So at the time, landlords would charge Black tenants higher rent because they usually couldn't afford to move. So people would they would like host these things called rent parties where tenants would like hire a band or maybe get some like bootleg liquor or whatever. And they would charge like 25 cents at the door for people to like come in and party at their house so they could like supplement their rent.
I love that. Oh my God, I love that so much. And that actually hurts my soul a little bit, knowing the housing crisis that's happening now because of things like Airbnb and VRBO. And that's like, people are like, oh, we're going to supplement our rent from our second or third home by utilizing people just wanting to vacation.
Yeah.
This is such a better way.
Yeah.
Supplement your rent when you're just trying to get rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
By throwing a party that benefits people and they're just giving you a nickel or a quarter.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you know, quarter in 1920, which is still probably, which was like...
It's like $5 or something.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
probably like $5. Yeah,
yeah.
$10, something like that,
Yeah.
whatever.
So you go and pay $5.
Yeah, which is like, that's perfect. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, of course. You're hosting, you're having, you know, you have your friends who are playing, because and it's also kind of, I guess, where it's where a lot of jazz bands started up, was like doing rent parties, because it's like, you know, it's an easy gig. You're probably not going to get paid much, but you get some like free booze and some maybe like chips and guac or what, I don't know, whatever they're eating back then at parties.
Probably not chips and guac, but yes.
Yeah,
I think that's more of a modern, like a very much more of a modern construct of like what you have at parties.
Get some pizza.
Now.
I don't know. Get to use someone's Wi-Fi for free for like 5 minutes. I don't know. And like,
I like it. Okay.
You know, whatever they did back in the 20s. And but yeah, like, you know, so and then you kind of get known through, you know, like people. And so then it's, you know, it's also where, you know, a lot of these like notable Harlem Renaissance like luminaries and stuff like that were hanging out. And so she becomes friends with people like Sterling Brown and like Ethel Waters. And part of it is because it's like she's extremely intelligent and she has this amazing sense of humor. And as one friend said, quote, "the gift of walking into hearts."
Aww. If that could be said about me, I would be the happiest person ever. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's such a compliment.
And Sterling Brown said about her, so she rarely drank, but Sterling Brown said about her, quote, "when Zora was there, she was the party."
You can be the party without having to drink.
Yeah.
Even though we're sitting here having cocktails, but, you know.
And I don't know if Zora ever did her own rent parties, but her apartment was kind of known as being this like open house for like artists and stuff. And she could be like back in her bedroom, like working on articles and writing things. And the party would still be like going off in her living room and all of that.
That's funny.
Yeah. That she just kind of...
How fun.
Yeah.
Such an interesting and vivacious way of living.
Yeah. People just like being around her. And like, so it's 1925, right? That year of the awards dinner.
I'm interested. Okay.
Yes. And there was another newcomer that night who received a handful of awards as well. The poet Langston Hughes.
Oh, I know Langston Hughes.
So both he and Zora were some of the only people who weren't from Harlem. Like I think he lived in New Jersey or something. That's another podcast someday. But I'm pretty sure he lived in New Jersey. He never lived in like New York, or maybe he did for a second. And so both of them like quickly bond. At one point they even kind of, you know, do a magazine or whatever together. You know, they just kind of remain sort of friends and stuff.
Yeah.
It's also at this time that she meets Franz Boas, who's considered the father of American anthropology. and he encourages her to enroll at Barnard College, which was Columbia University's women's college, to study anthropology and do some work for him. And so she does, after reading, or she receives this like scholarship or fellowship or something like that from one of the Barnard trustees. And she decides, like, for her first assignment is to measure the skulls of people in Harlem to disprove the theory of racial intellectual inferiority. I don't know. So she's measuring. She's gonna run around with this anthropological device, like measuring skulls, to be like, hey, look, everyone has the same skull shape. Like, so how are people like just genetically less intelligent? You know?
Yeah.
So as Langston Hughes wrote, quote, almost nobody else could stop the average Harlemite on Lenox Avenue and measure his head with a strange-looking anthropological device and not get bawled out for the attempt, except Zora, who used to stop anyone whose head looked interesting and measure it.
I like it. Excuse me, can I measure your head, please? To me, I feel like I would get a lot of like, hell no, get away from me. I can imagine she's the one person that's like, sure, you can measure my head.
Okay, like...
This is weird, but this is fun.
I mean, honestly, I feel like it probably wouldn't just be like streets of New York. I feel like you go anywhere in the world with like a weird looking contraption. You're like, can I measure your head real quick? People would be like, no.
Probing me for something?
Like, what? What do you want? Like,
no thanks. That's hilarious. Yeah. I like her. She's spunky.
Yeah. So Zora really loved the idea of collecting African-American folktale stories and songs that had been told in Black communities for generations. So she took a road trip to the Deep South in 1927 in her little Nash coupe that she named Sassy Susie.
I like it.
Yeah.
Sassy Susie.
The little car. Sassy Susie.
Get in your little Sassy Susie.
Yeah. And while she's in Mobile, Alabama, she happens to be walking by the train station and runs smack into Langston Hughes, who also just came down south and was heading to Tuskegee University. And Hurston is like, oh my God, why don't you like come with me? Because I'm driving around trying to like study things and pick up stories and do all this stuff, and I'll drop you off. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds fun. So
Sassy Susie, Langston Hughes,
and
Zora.
Yeah. So
I would pay money to see this.
Action. Right? That is just, yeah. Like,
can I just be the fly on that car?
Dude, right?
In that car?
Yeah, can I stuff myself somehow in that tiny little car? Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the movie right there.
That's the movie.
Zora and Langston road trip.
In Sassy Susie.
Yeah, but right in the beginning of like their careers. Yeah, so Hurston was heading around Alabama to interview Cujo Kazula Lewis, who at the time was believed to be the oldest surviving slave who was born in Africa and transported in the transatlantic slave trade. This is like in the 1920s. I mean, the guy must be in his like 70s or 80s or something like that. Like,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because if it was like the 1860s,
1860.
It ended. So if he came over
1860,
like right before that.
Yeah. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, he's got to be like
so
80s.
Yeah. But yeah, so she's gonna go interview him, and and so her and Langston end up spending 5 weeks together driving around Alabama and Georgia, you know, splitting gas and food and money and having conversations about probably art and race and
everything.
Yeah. The one thing we do know that they talked about during that time was that Langston Hughes had just met Charlotte Osgood Mason, who was this really rich white socialite who gave money to a lot of African-American artists and writers. And Langston told Zora like that he would introduce her to Charlotte when they got back to New York.
Familiar.
Charlotte Osgood Mason.
Yeah.
I know it does kind of, but
like
I don't know.
Maybe it's just because it's like a name that sounds
Hello,
familiar.
I'm Charlotte Osgood Mason. I'm a rich white socialite.
And that's a really good transatlantic accent. So I feel like she'd be totally there.
So Charlotte Mason ends up paying Zora $200 a month to basically continue her anthropology research. But in return, Mason would own everything Zora collected, including Zora's texts. And Zora went all along with this because ultimately it was the Great Depression. She had lost her other scholarship stuff and it was hard to find funding. And so,
I mean, and that's how that kind of has always been like the Medici family, you know, like in Renaissance Italy, Like, they commissioned a lot of artists, like Michelangelo and all that stuff, and they owned all of that they commissioned.
So it's that old
Kind
school.
of like, yeah, it's a little too, like, 300 years too old school.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, but patron of the arts. She like insisted everyone, like all of the people that she gave money to, call her godmother and stuff. She seems like a little funny.
Extra eccentric.
There's pictures of her, and she looks like one of those funny old ladies. Like, she looks like a cartoon person.
I'm into it.
Academically, this is where things get a little weird for Zora, because on one hand, she's still studying with Boas, who is really encouraged her to overturn the idea of the different cultures being able to be like ranked by intellectual superiority or value. And then you have Charlotte Mason, who seemed mostly interested in proving that African Americans are, quote, America's great link with the primitive.
Oh, jeez. What?
Yeah. There was a lot of quotes that I was reading by Charlotte Mason, and I was all like, oh my God, am I just like, is this the times, or is she just like not great?
No, that's not the times. She's just not great. Nope. No.
I'm like, oh, but she's giving all this money and she's done it, you know, and I'm like, oh,
and
but,
she wants to take ownership. Nope.
Yep. And then all of a sudden you read quotes from her and it's like, oh God, it's more than, it's not just, well, it's kind of complicated because of the history. It's more like, oh God.
I just lost that like taste in my mouth, you know, when you like, when people say something awful, you're just like,
oh,
ugh.
Yeah. Yes. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Drink, but yes, it leaves a bad taste. So I was like, ugh.
And then you also have Zora, who is an artist by nature and wasn't really a rigid academic. And so she was, you know, most interested in just like exploring all this like art and culture and getting to travel and have these amazing experiences and being able to like write about them and write about, you know, the history of people and all of that stuff. And so you kind of have these like this triad of kind of things getting sort of complicated for her in her life with, you know, how she's getting her money and her education and her own sort of wants. So Zora ends up writing several books during this time that wouldn't be published until like much later. One of the most famous of them is Mules and Men, which is a collection of over 70 folk tales and stories, with a good number of them and being about like hoodoo, which is like African-American voodoo, I guess. And it also includes Zora's own experiences being an initiate of hoodoo practices in New Orleans. Yeah, she had to like eat a cat or something.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. I would love to go to like New Orleans and like
just kind of get a better understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like from us in California, where there's many, many miles between, there's only so much you can understand.
Yeah.
But to go there and understand it, because my family have gone and they're like, it's fascinating and a beautiful culture. And y'all have been to New Orleans except for me. Screw you.
Oh, we should gotta go then. I've never been either.
Let's go. I've always wanted to go.
Me too.
And just listen to jazz and read books and drink coffee. And
yeah,
I'm not into like the party scene of New Orleans. I'm into,
eat those little pastries that everyone talks about.
Beignets?
Yes.
Café du Monde.
Yes.
No, it's my dream. I don't care about the party scene. I just want to go and the culture and the food and the music and the architecture. Ugh.
Oh, I know, right? Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah. So she wrote that. She wrote, and that one gets published a couple years later. But then she also wrote Every Tongue Got to Confess, about African American folk tales in the Gulf states. And it wasn't published until 2001, after the manuscript was found in the Smithsonian archives. And then Barracoon, which is the Spanish name for like barracks, Spanish word for barracks, which is about Cujo Lewis, which wasn't published until 2008. So,
interesting.
Yeah, I think that was also one of those things where it was like found later kind of thing. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe, I don't know. It could have, I think they just didn't publish. I don't know. But yeah, so she's writing all this stuff. She's collecting all this data, and then she's not writing because, you know, she's got this whole weird thing of like her, you know, Professor Boas, like wanting her to be very academic and objective, like you're supposed to be with academic things. And then Charlotte Mason, who has her own motives for wanting to have all this stuff like collected. And then, you know, Zora
I just want to yell out really badly. I'm going to do it now. Girl, get out of that relationship now. Okay, it's off my system.
I think we blew the mic.
Sorry, but it's very upsetting. This relationship is really upsetting me, and I've been trying to damper it down, and if I don't yell it, I totally blew the mic, but whatever. So just remember that you have to, like,
I know. I'll see it before I'll be like, all right, I gotta lower that.
I'm just so upset. Anyway.
Yeah. So she, and so it's like for Zora, she wanted to present the text, like she wanted to represent the original folktale story or the experiences as close as possible, to like what it was like, which, does get into kind of her writing style, but I think I'll talk about that later. But she does publish some of her essays and stories from her travels around the U.S., like her essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me, which is about her experience, how she experienced discrimination for the first time as a young adult after leaving Eatonville. And she writes, quote, "Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can anyone deny themselves the pleasure of my company is beyond me."
Oh, I love her.
I know. She's like, well, fuck you back.
But not even.
Yeah, it's more like,
because
what I know I'm awesome. Like, I know I'm awesome. So, you know what? It's their
on
problem.
You. Yeah. I love that just because it's like, there's just so much anger and like, I get it. But to approach it with a self-elevating, positive way that secretly puts down the other person, I think is awesome.
Your loss.
Yeah.
So Zora Neale Hurston is known for writing in a reflective or free indirect discourse style of writing, where she uses speech patterns and vernacular that reflects the way that like the character speaks, but isn't always like written in like grammatically correct or like proper English. So it's a lot of that. I think didn't even Mark Twain kind of do that? Yeah, he does that
That's
too.
What he was known for.
Yeah,
with speaking in the or writing in more of the colloquial. Oh God, good luck saying that word. Colloquial.
Yes. Speech patterns.
Speech patterns.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and some people found it, like, especially, like, a lot of other, like, African-American critics and stuff like that found her way of writing, they found it to be, like, demoralizing or demeaning, that, like, that she's kind of playing on this whole minstrel character version of what Black people are like in America. And so it gets criticized a lot. But like she kind of came from it from this perspective of like, I'm trying to capture this history, and this moment. And this is the way that, because she's, when she's working as an anthropologist and, she's like, this is the way that these people in the South were talking to me. So this is the way that I'm going to present their words because it's more accurate. I mean, probably if she had like a lot of tape recorders or like that kind of stuff, she probably would have, I don't know, who knows? Maybe she would have written differently, but she didn't have, she didn't have that stuff. Yeah. Like, I'm sure that stuff was around, but she didn't have that. She only had her own pen and paper. So she's trying to be, writing, dictate it the way that she hears it.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off of this. I'm listening to a book, Dial A for Aunties, and I will do the author really fast because I don't want to get in trouble for that. And it's by Jessie Sutanto. And she's she's writing from an Indonesian perspective, and she wrote at the beginning of her book, like, I'm writing these characters because this is my family, and I know, like, they have this kind of grasp of the English language, and while it might seem stereotypical or whatever, and it is in no way reflective of a stereotype or their intelligence level. It's a reflective of how I view my family and as a person who lives in Indonesia. I thought that was interesting. So it's like there's always so many different perspectives of like different accents and how we portray people in writing. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I just thought it was an interesting perspective. Just because you write a dialect a certain way says nothing on their intelligent level.
You're right.
Level.
I mean, I think it's it's a fair criticism when that style kind of gets outplayed later on and stuff like that. And criticisms I don't think have to be like angry or whatever like they are today. I feel like you say the word criticism and it's always like, I'm outraged, I'm going to clutch my pearls and you scream at you on the internet, like it's but it's like I don't think it's fair to like kind of criticize and to be able to just explore that And I think that's probably why, yeah, that author probably puts something in the beginning of hers. But because people, yeah, feel that way. But it's like, it doesn't always have to be that. Like, depending on your perspective, it doesn't have to be that way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up a good point. Like, later on, it maybe kind of got too much overuse, but maybe not. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah. So by 1930, things get a little weird with her and Langston, Hughes, and Charlotte Mason. Zora and Langston decide to write a play together because Zora, you know, she's already written a bunch of plays, and Langston, his mother, I think, was an actress. And so he was, so even on their road trip, they were talking like, oh my gosh, we should write like an opera or something together. Like, we need to like do something super creative. And he's a poet, you know, so it's like, oh, playwriting is maybe like our jam. Let's do this. And Charlotte Mason gets like super fucking pissed at Langston Hughes, and is like, you're distracting her from her work. Like, I don't, you know, because she really is into Zora doing all this anthropology stuff, collecting all of, you know, this research into the primitive African Americans or whatever. And so she, you know, and she kind of was like over Langston, I guess, at this point. Like, he wasn't really publishing anything else. And so she's super pissed at him for distracting Zora. So Langston has a falling out with Charlotte Mason. He's kind of like, you know, gone. I'm no longer going to, I don't want your money anymore kind of thing, when he really needed the money still.
Well,
and
smart choice though. Yeah,
exactly. That's how I felt. It's like everyone who I was reading like about this kind of little moment in history, they are like, we don't know exactly what happened between Langston Hughes and Charlotte Mason. And I'm like, she's clearly a super racist. And like, he probably was like, I don't want any more of this shit. And he even like says stuff like that about how like she wanted me to like be like more African than American, and I have no real connection to being like, I'm not from Africa. And I, you know, I don't know. He says it really beautifully. He's like, the rhythms of this and that, and the rhythms, I don't know. It's a beautiful quote. I should have put it in here, but that's the Langston Hughes podcast.
I mean, it's Langston Hughes, yeah. Not just podcast, but you said beautiful, he's beautiful.
I mean,
like eloquently
oh
spoken.
My gosh.
So.
So it's like, he can say things way better than I could, but that's why I'm like, but it's like, clearly it's like, I don't know. She's racist. He didn't want to deal with that shit anymore. It wasn't worth the money. You know, he's gone. And so, but Zora, she's off like running around America, you know, doing her thing. So she kind of only knows about whatever happened between letters. And Charlotte Mason basically tells Zora, like, I don't want you communicating with him anymore. Like, you can't write this play with him. And since Zora's like still getting money from her, I'm guessing that she essentially sort of was like, oh, okay, like, I'm not going to really talk to him much anymore, I guess. So she and Langston Hughes kind of have this falling out.
That's sad.
Like, really bad falling out. Does not go down easy. Because, like, so Langston Hughes and Zora were, like, best friends. Like, there's not really any belief that there's a romantic relationship, because a lot of people think that Langston was probably gay, or if anything, he just, like, he like only slept with people that he like had no like emotional bond with. And Zora was kind of the same way too. Like, she didn't really hook up with people that like she was close to. And so their relationship with each other, they were just really, really like best friends. And, you know, they wrote all these letters back and forth, where they'd be like, I hate you. And the next letter would be like, I'm sorry, let's just be friends. I love you so much. And like, these letters are kind of crossing in the mail. So like, you know, they're sort of responding to different ones based off of like when they receive them. And so, you know, they're having all this trouble with like whatever was going on, plus like communication's obviously not great. And so their relationship completely ends, and it's like really, really devastating for both of them.
So sad.
Like Langston, when he would publish his autobiography, he wrote about Zora, quote, in her youth, she was always getting scholarships and things from wealthy white people, some of whom simply paid her just to sit around and represent the Negro race for them. To many of her white friends, she was the perfect darky.
That's not flattering. Also awful.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Zora eventually publishes her own autobiography in the late 1940s, and she just completely leaves Langston Hughes out of it.
Oh my God, this is heartbreaking.
Yeah. She's just like, you know what? I'm not even going to say anything about you, because I think that's more daggers than...
Gonna ignore you ever existed.
Yes.
Oh, that's rough.
So Zora then spends time in the early 1930s writing a couple musical review shows, and they feature a lot of the folklore from her research. And she felt like performance was kind of the best way to sort of show folktales, folklore, you know, stories and things. And they all get really positive reviews, except they end up leaving her in debt.
Oh,
And so after she cuts off ties with Charlotte Mason, woo,
thank you.
she publishes Mules and Men, as previously mentioned. But right before that, she publishes Jonah's Gourdvine. Jonah's Gourdvine, which is her first fictional novel, and it's kind of about her mom and her dad. It's not like it's semi-autobiography. So in the mid-30s, she's given a fellowship from the Guggenheim Foundation to conduct research in Jamaica and Haiti, mainly focusing on Caribbean voodoo. And she spends several months living with the Maroons, which was a tribe of people derived from slaves who escaped slavery on the plantations in Jamaica and like escaped up to the mountains, and then they continued to like live up there.
Created their own society up there.
Yeah.
How cool are those people?
I know. I'm like, also there's mountains in Jamaica. I'm like, I didn't even know that. I'm like, that's probably.
I felt like there had to be. I'm not gonna say.
Had to be mountains.
Yeah.
You're thinking volcanoes or something because it's a tropical island. No.
I don't know if it's like bad for me to say, but the Jamaican bobsled team, like what would they have literally been able to practice on if there wasn't at least a single mountain?
I mean, it's a fair point. They have to go downhill somehow.
They have to have something to have it. They can't have it just like flat trying to like learn how to do the Jamaican bobsled team. I'm a little bit hanging my head in shame. I love cool run-ins. Fair.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah. So she went and lived with them and like is chilling, and yeah, she's fine. I think she really liked finding like more like kind of, you know, more obscure like little things, you know, little tribes, little like cultures, you know, that aren't found in other places and stuff like that. I really
definitely what you want to have that ability to do when you're an anthropologist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not like it's like they're like, go down to Jamaica and tell us about voodoo or whatever, and she's all like, oh my god, did you hear about these people up on the mountain? Like they seem really cool. I'm gonna hang out with them for a couple months, you know? Yeah. It's like, wait, no, but they're not voodoo people. Like,
yeah,
she's like, yeah, but they're cool. Yeah. And so then she's in Haiti for a while, and that's where she writes Their Eyes Were Watching God in just 7 weeks and sends it off to her publisher.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the romantic male lead is Tea Cake, which is like such a cute name.
Yes.
It's the best name for a man in a book.
I know, but it's...
Hey, Tea Cake.
I won't say the ending.
Yeah. And he's based off of this man that she had a love affair with while she was in Harlem. You know, the whole book's kind of based off of her hometown of Eatonville. When it's published, it's got totally mixed reviews. On one hand, you have like women and white critics that love it. I think it's like this great novel. On the other hand, the black male critics aren't super into it. Most of them aren't into it.
Okay, but we're missing a massive demographic there.
Black women?
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't really many black women writers, so we don't know what they were thinking.
That's a sad rebuttal, but yes. Okay. Okay,
exactly.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Yep. So yeah, like at this point, her fiction is already being criticized by like black literary figures because who she was all like friends with at one point, but like, you know, they kind of criticize her for like not being political enough, and they don't, you know, there's, you know, again, the use of free and direct discourse is sort of, people don't like it, but then also the problem that a lot of them are having with this is that like all of the black men are either cruel or aggressive or both, you know, in some capacity in the book. And
I felt like Tea Cake was,
well, I mean, he's great, he's the love, but he's also still, he like abandons her at one point.
they definitely
and then
had
like
a
comes back
tumultuous relationship.
Yeah, it's not you know, and so it's just, yeah, so I think, you know, people were like kind of, I feel like people were probably rubbed the wrong way when it was just like, oh my gosh, you're just showing like black men as being like brutal and aggressive, and
in a time where you're really having to fight for a good name because of like the inherent, you know,
there's this
racism that's going
everyone
on, and
thinks
they're trying to fight
brutal
against
and aggressive, and now you just
need
proved it or something.
More. Yeah, like stop like putting out there like something that hurts the cause. But
yeah,
it's a good book. So
yeah. Richard Wright at one way put it, quote, "Her characters swing like a pendulum internally in that safe and narrow orbit which America likes to see the Negro live, between laughter and tears." Like, you're just kind of holding us, and you're keeping us in the little pigeonhole, and you could do more. I mean, what's interesting though is that there's a lot of Black critics who did like her work, and then there's some people who are all like, well, she's a better writer than this. She could have done better, which is like, it's like, that's a criticism, I guess, but like,
yeah, but it's like, did anyone just say like, great job for being a female Black writer that got published during this time?
Right. And it's
give her credit.
Book. And it's like, it's about a woman. It's not about you. And you're,
yeah,
it's about a Black woman. Like, it's not about you right now. It's about a different group. It's, like, hello.
Yeah. I would have loved to know like what her reactions were to these criticisms.
I know. I don't think I found anything that said what her reaction. I don't know. She doesn't, she's, as I'm finding, very stoic when it needs to be stoic. Yeah. Like,
so she's not going to rebuttal with these. She's just going to be like, whatever. I'm fabulous. Mm-hmm. Go away.
Mm-hmm. All right. It's also during this time she goes through her second divorce. I know I haven't really mentioned her love life because she barely mentions her own love life. Don't die.
Okay. Timing was perfect, and had there not been a microphone, I would have done a spit take. Second divorce. Poof. That's what it would have been. Because, yeah, I thought she was single during all of this.
Oh, yeah. No. She's now been married twice.
Wow. Okay.
She'll be married a third time.
Casual.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like she would get married. She'd be married for like a couple months, and then she'd run off to another, okay, I'm going to Florida to like do some research. I'm going to the Caribbean. I'm going here. She's just sort of gets married and then it's like, I'm going to leave. Bye. And then it's like, here, have some divorce papers while I'm gone.
She's independent, because Lord knows I did that to my husband once or twice. 3 times?
Yeah, I'd be like, bye, I'm leaving. They didn't slip.
He's stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's in Haiti, writing the book, and then she's studying Caribbean voodoo, and she takes probably like the first picture of a zombie, however you want to think about that. Zombie is a person who comes back to life.
Well, but
and is,
like that's like,
but is missing their soul.
Yeah, well, it's just the modern adaptation of. I actually weirdly went down the rabbit hole on this one.
Oh, nice.
So the modern zombie did come from like hoodoo, voodoo, like religious ceremony.
Yeah.
But we just, as in our weird Western culture, took it a step too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no like argument against zombie, but what they do.
Eating
brains and moaning and walking around like that.
Yeah.
Is not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I guess in Haiti, just like in other areas, there's people will be buried above ground. And so who knows if it was, I mean, even I think Zora said like, what did she call it? She's like, I don't know if they were actually dead before, but it might have just been a state of animation, suspended animation or whatever. And she's like, but it's complicated. I don't know how to really explain it all, but and so it's like the people just kind of walk out of the graveyard and appear back at their house, and they're like, hey, what's up? And obviously they're completely changed, because probably if you've essentially been like buried alive, even if it's a above ground grave, you're probably not going to be so keen with the people who like thought you were dead.
Yes.
So of course there's probably a bit of traumatic personality changes.
Yeah.
Or maybe there are zombies. Who knows? I don't know.
But yes, but you're right. Like there was always that possibility of like the suspended animation, whatever it was, like hence the name or the phrase Saved by the Bell.
What? Oh, right. The whole toe with the bell, whatever.
So that if you were buried and but because you were buried in that, like people literally thought you were dead.
Yeah.
And then you got buried.
Yeah.
And then like you would wiggle and ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, yeah.
Dig him up, quick.
Yeah.
So it happens. Who knows? It's all like mystical.
Yeah, exactly. So she does that. She's also, while she's there, she's like warned by a lot of people to like stop doing all of her research. And she ends up getting like really, really sick, like is like stuck in bed for a long time. And so she kind of was like, oh my gosh, did someone put a curse or whatever on me? And kicks it out of Haiti after that.
But she took it as a potential curse.
Yeah, and she's like,
I was just
"Oh,
thinking,
okay,
like,
goodbye."
who could curse her?
I
No
know.
one.
She gets along with literally everyone in the world. Like,
Except for
or,
Langston
well,
Hughes.
America. Yeah. Yeah. Or, yeah, except for Langston Hughes. She got along with him at one point for several years.
Yeah.
So at this point now, she's like a fairly established author. She's published 7 books, including Their Eyes Are Watching God, Tell My Horse, her biography, Dust Tracks on the Road. And she's also published a great deal of articles. So in the 1940s, she ends up in Honduras, where she's heard that some of the populations there had like partial African ancestry. And so she wanted to like kind of check out like the cultural overlaps compared to like that she's seen in like the United States and the Caribbean and all of that. And she also was really fascinated with like the idea of like maybe finding in Mayan ruins. She was like, I want to go see the Mayan ruins and like discover new ones, you know? Like she's
She's an anthropologist.
yeah, she's so into it.
This makes sense. Like everything you're saying is like, yes, I would expect every anthropologist to say all of this.
I want to go to the Mayan ruins and see if there's more shit to find. Hello, you know,
Or
and
that,
and like cultures to find, like the
Yes.
people and little tribes and you know, like
how
are
did
hiding
we,
in the jungles
how
and
did we spread out as humanity?
yeah, exactly, and how the influences have happened. And so in 1952, she's asked by the editor of the Pittsburgh Courier to cover the Florida trial of Ruby Mccomb, who was a rich black woman accused of murdering a white doctor, and he was also a state senator. And so Zora was able to bring an interesting perspective to the trial because way back in the 1930s, she had done research throughout the Gulf states and stuff like that. I think actually it was also still Florida, like these like lumber towns where it was very common to practice paramour rights happening in the segregated South, which is essentially after slavery ended, it was common for white male business owners or men in power in their communities to take black women as like sexual slaves and force them to bear children. And this practice continued as sort of this open secret in a lot of areas in the Deep South well into the first half of the 20th century. So, history's fun.
History's fun.
Yeah, and so like with the Ruby Mccomb case, it was quite evident to Zora that this was what was happening with this woman. So she wrote extensively about like the trial and the circumstance, even though like she was completely being like stonewalled by like all the people in the community, black and white. No one was talking to her. And part of it was because like, I don't know, the doctor guy was kind of in business with Ruby Mccomb's husband, who was this like, he owned this underground like gambling situation.
Oh, God.
Like the judge was even like a pallbearer at like the dead doctor guy's funeral. Everything was just very small Florida town, very
Incestuous.
yeah. I didn't really want to use that word when it's like we're also talking about like sexual slavery stuff going on as well. And so Ruby Mccomb.
But it's like when you say incestuous, it's not necessarily like always a sexual connotation.
It just felt like too much in that.
Okay, fair enough.
I feel like 2020 making like really bad puns. Like,
But it's not
I
like a
know.
pun. It's just like the word means that it's like
Yeah.
too close and you're just like, oh, there's too much overlap.
right. Yeah, exactly. And that was what was happening. And so, yeah, like, you know, Ruby Mccomb wasn't allowed to like really testify against like her experiences of like being raped by this man. She was only allowed to testify about the fact that one of her children was clearly this guy's child. She's actually, I think it's kind of a landmark case because of the fact that she was like the first black woman who was allowed to have any sort of testimony in her defense of killing a white man. Before that, black women were not allowed to testify in their defense if they killed a white guy. So Ruby Combs found guilty by an all-white male jury, which is also due to Jim Crow voter suppression. Florida's awesome. And so she's sentenced to death, but then her conviction and death sentence are overturned during her second trial, where she was just found mentally incompetent and committed to a mental hospital where she remained until 1974. So yeah, and Zora covered that case.
Okay.
And like was like really, you know,
into it.
Yeah, really into it and really into bringing out this idea, you know, like black women being raped by white men and like no one's doing anything about it. And they're actually kind of like okay with it in a lot of like towns and cities and all of that. And it's fucking crazy. And she kind of saw this as a way of sort of ending that. And she felt like when Ruby Mccomb like testified, it was sort of, putting the nail in the coffin of like this practice like continuing to happen, which I'm guessing maybe, I don't know, who knows. Yeah. I mean, at least, yeah. And that level of like, well, my grandfather owned your grandfather, so therefore I get to take you as my sexual concubine,
Generational trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to Zora.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, despite being a successful novelist and journalist, Zora didn't have any money. Okay, I just want to backtrack for a second. I felt it was important to mention the Ruby Mccomb thing because I feel like it's not brought up enough. Like, when we talk about like racism in America, like there's a lot of that focus on like black men accused of raping white women, but we don't talk enough about like black women being raped by white men. And it's just, I feel like it's like, it's something that gets lost, It's the patriarchal kind of narrative that like stays in place of like this poor, black man who got accused by these like white women. And I get it. That's also horrible, but I feel like it's just not, I just feel like, yeah. Black women get left behind and it's terrible. And it's terrible that it was like, I don't know, this thing was happening for like 100 fucking years under everyone's noses and everyone was like totally fine with it in a sense.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It's heavy. Yeah. It's going to sit with me, but I agree.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, why I brought up when you were talking about I just feel like that demographic of like black women do get swallowed up a lot, and it's just not okay.
Yeah. And that's why, like, because there was so many things I could mention, and it was like, out of all the things, I was like, I just feel like this was important, like in the history of like Zora's life and stuff. I felt like, I don't know. I felt like that part was important.
There you go. Yeah, that's fair.
So, okay.
Totally.
All right. So I'll repeat this paragraph. So back to Zora. At this point, despite being a successful novelist and journalist, Zora didn't have any money. She never received substantial royalties from any of her work. And so she ends up getting a job as a maid for like this white couple in Miami. And then this woman finds this article that Zora had written and is like so shocked to like find out like, oh my God, my housekeeper is this like really prolific author. And so it ends up, there's like a bunch of newspaper articles, written about like, oh my God, this famous author is like now working as a maid in Florida. Woo! And it's just like awkward and not fun. And so Zora like kicks it out of there and moves to Fort Pierce, Florida.
But you would think that she would maybe, not stay in Florida. That was my thought. That was my confused face. Like, she's lived so many places. Here's this awkward, terrible situation that happens.
Yeah.
Why not just straight up leave Florida?
I guess she must have, I don't know, Florida, grew up, in Florida area. She likes the warmer climate, that kind of tropically. So maybe that's why. But she ends up in Fort Pierce, and she ends up taking some more jobs as like in journalism. She also works as a substitute teacher. But eventually, while living in a welfare home, she ends up suffering from a stroke and dying when she's 60 years old.
We still have like, sorry, wait.
Yep.
Wait, what? I thought there was so much more left of the story. I was just listening, and then you're just like, oh.
Yep. No.
Casual say of that. What?
And then
how old is she? She was
60 or 50, depending on who you are and who you ask.
Oh my God, that was so sudden.
Yeah.
That was like, what?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
On welfare, buried in an unmarked grave.
Oh. No. I was... Lesley, stop. Go back. Rewind. Pause. You're going to go back where she's getting the job in Florida, and it's not easy, and she goes to... and then I was waiting for the pendulum to shift up again.
I know, right?
Not here. Here. I was supposed to here. Not here.
So after her death...
Wild gestures are happening. I'm very shocked by this.
After her death, all of her papers and belongings were ordered to be burned, and this... officer friend of hers who knew her ends up saving a bunch of the documents and like unpublished stuff that she wrote. But still a lot of it was burned. But that guy saves a bunch. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We went downhill a little bit more.
I was really hoping for an upstate. I know
And
that's
then,
like dumb of me to say, but
and then Zora and her work essentially fall into obscurity for decades. Her books all fall out of print until 1973, when a young writer named Alice Walker decided to find Neale Hurston's grave, Zora Neale Hurston's grave, and place a proper headstone on it. Like, I guess Alice Walker even pretended to be Zora Neale Hurston's like niece, so she could like find where she was buried, and like, yeah, and like when she's young, she just like paid for her own like for like the headstone. A couple years later, Alice Walker would write and give lectures at Barnard College about this experience and how she found Zora's work in her like childhood and young adulthood, and how Zora's life influenced her to be a writer as well. And it's kind of because of Alice Walker talking about Zora in the 70s that all of a sudden, boom, everyone started being interested in what she had to say and her work, and they kind of rediscovered it all, you know, and that's where then like, you know, some random dude finds in the Smithsonian archives like this book that she wrote that had never been published, and then it gets published in 2001, and everything just kind of takes off in her death after she was alive. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm still in shock. Like, I really was not expecting that. Like, I was really not expecting that level of tragedy and obscurity for this vivacious, crazy, energetic life that what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And thanks, Alice Walker. That's awesome, because yeah, high school kids are still studying. Their eyes were watching God.
Yes.
Oh my God. What? I was like, I really honestly thought we had another half hour left.
How long have we been recording?
So it'd been like an hour. But still, like, I swear, I just thought there was going to be more. So I've been not saying much because I was like, oh, we probably have a lot to cover still. So just be like listening, engaged, but like not saying much.
Nope. That's awesome. Traveling, you know, crazy, and then just dies penniless. But then
It's
everyone
so
loves her again.
Sudden, like,
Yeah. I mean, because she did all this amazing research. And so it's just like, you know, she recorded things that would have been, like, she recorded civilizations that, you know, that would have, aspects of civilizations that would have been completely lost if probably it wasn't for her, you know, doing something and transcribing it. And,
very influential, very amazing, very perfect.
Yeah. You have no words.
I have no words. I really cannot tell you. Like, I was really trying to filter on any sort of like extras, because I swear we had more.
That's it. I have some fun facts though. I like how I just like lifted my iPad at the same time you did this whole like head lifty thing. It was very cartoony. One of the jobs that she had later on in life was at the library at Patrick Air Force Base, but she was fired for being too well educated. She works at a library. Don't you want educate? Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's funny.
Army, Air Force. Zora was technically a Republican. She opposed the New Deal, and she also opposed Brown versus the Board of Education. Yeah. She thought that black children would suffer from being like educated with white children. She felt like they were like that the segregation system was starting to improve, and she felt like as long as like it is, you know, equal, like then she was like, I don't see a problem with it. And I'm guessing it's probably because she grew up, you know, like, like the way that she grew up. And
just interesting.
Yeah. Isn't it kind of like fascinating? It's like, I mean, I get it from your time, like how you grew up and stuff. You saw things very differently than other people did, but like, it's still like, girl, the things are changing. Like,
it's so interesting. That's very interesting. Especially knowing her background.
Yes, yeah.
Of being in the full like black community, and like how she was so successful and educated and supported. Mm-hmm. But like segregation's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, or segregation's right, is really what she said. Yeah, like desegregation.
But like I'm
yeah.
saying like
oh yeah, yeah.
segregation's
Oh,
wrong,
okay,
so
yeah.
do I agree with
Yeah,
her?
yeah, so
No.
yeah, I know. Like she was I mean, maybe it's probably like her experience. Like she was educated with all black kids with her in her class, and then she goes to Columbia, and she's the only black girl, in her class, and it's like she's so.
Well, but the
she
other
did,
college first, that was an all-black college. And,
yeah, and she did well. I think she did well. So it's like maybe that like it's probably from her own experience, and it's like things. You can't just take everything from your own experience. You have to think about how things are for a lot of other people, and progressing with the times and like how things are changing. So it's like, I don't know. It's just kind of, but I think it's funny. I think it's interesting, just fun fact. Her tombstone says she was born in 1901, her fake birth date.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
Even in death, she's still 10 years younger.
I like it. I like it.
Yep.
She's definitely that. Like, at one point, though, you gotta imagine where it's like, why would I age myself up 10 years? Like, I'm gonna be young, kind of a thing. Like, I see her with her scarf going, like, I'm just gonna be
You know
young.
what? I can pass for 16. I can totally pass.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm gonna just be fucking 16 now.
Yeah, I love it.
They'll all talk about how I died young.
Yes, right? Exactly. Like, that's how yes. She makes herself like her own tragic hero, which she ended up being the tragic hero, but like she was probably thinking like, oh, I would die at 80, but oh my gosh, I'd die at 70 and everyone would think I'd died at such a young age or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I have my 2 quotes because I like my quotes.
You do like your quotes.
Love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place.
Aw.
I do not weep at the world. I'm too busy sharpening my oyster knife.
Ooh, feisty.
I know.
I like it.
Felt like those 2 really represent her. Like,
Those are good ones.
Yeah. Where it's like, the whole like, she doesn't really respond to things. Yeah, she doesn't respond to things. She's too busy sharpening that knife.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. Well, Guava, because of her home.
Yes.
Town. Rum, because of how much time she spent in the Caribbean.
Yes.
I'm going to say Mojito-esque because it's the Caribbean, but there's something Harlem in there, and I don't know what it would be.
Like the lime? I don't know.
Yeah, the lime.
The lime.
Sprinkle a little Harlem in there. A whole dash of Caribbean and then a splash of her hometown.
Lime mint. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like exactly. It's like mojito-ish, or it's like it can be totally Caribbean and this and that, but there's something also very like Southern, sit on a porch,
Yeah.
tell some stories.
Interesting. I like it. That was a good. I downed that because it was so good.
Yeah.
Usually we end and I have like 3 or 4 sips left. This is gone.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. I wanted to go more. I didn't really go too much Harlem-y with her, or even New York. I was like, because I just really saw how it's like she traveled around like Caribbean areas and the South, like the Gulf states. She talks a lot about the Gulf states and stuff. And so it's like, oh, what does all that have in common? It's like, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of lemonade-y, sit on a porch, drink some lemonade, which is what I think of when I think of the South.
I think of sweet tea.
Sweet tea.
Lord, do they love their sweet tea. Oh, I loved it. Well, thank you. Thank you, Zora.
Yes.
You're awesome. You're beautiful.
Yay. Thanks for listening.
You're welcome. Oh.
If you like our podcast, please like and subscribe and iTunes and leave a review, possibly.
Yes.
Leave reviews.
All the above.
Yes.
We love you.
Yeah, it helps us.
It does.
Alrighty. Well, bye.
Bye.
To Madeline vibe. Sources for this episode.
That's the hardest thing for me.
Sources for this episode are ZoraNealeHurston.com, excerpts from Dust Tracks on the Road by Zora Neale Hurston, Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston by Valerie Boyd, Finding a World I Thought Was Lost, Zora Neale Hurston and the People She Looked at Very Hard and Loved Very Much by Alice Walker, Road Trip with Zora and Langston in This Real-Life Literary Adventure by Maureen Corrigan, womenshistory.org article by Aralisha R. Norwood.